This news is funded by viewers like you. Please support our work at democracynow.org/give. Israel's bombardment of Gaza has entered its third month. Health officials in Gaza say the Israeli assault has killed over 17,000 Palestinians. Earlier this week, an Israeli airstrike in Gaza City killed the acclaimed Palestinian academic and activist Refaat Alareer, along with his brother, his sister, and 4 of his nieces. For more than 16 years, Alareer worked as a professor of English literature at the Islamic University of Gaza, where he taught Shakespeare and other subjects. Refaat Alareer was a father of 6 and a mentor to many young Palestinian writers and journalists. He also co-founded the organization We Are Not Numbers. He authored dozens of stories and poems about life under Israeli occupation in Gaza. In a few minutes, we'll speak to one of his friends. But first, I want to return to Refaat Alareer in his own words. He's spoken to us several times. This is October 10th. As he spoke to Democracy Now!, Israeli strikes rattled his family's home in Gaza City.
What is happening in Gaza is complete and utter extermination of the non-Jewish population in occupied Palestine. As you mentioned, Israel ordered a medieval hermetic siege from air and sea. Israel has also just bombed the only way out through Egypt, the Rafah crossing. The only way out is for what's happening, what we are foreseeing is slow starvation, slow genocide. Maybe Israel is going to push us all into the sea. And I think what is making it even more difficult than before is that the whole world, not even lip service, all American and European countries and politicians are rushing to pledge allegiance to Israel and to Netanyahu. Israeli American politicians, American presidential hopefuls are literally calling for genocide. American mainstream media is not pushing back against Israeli officials, calling for the collateral damage of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians in Gaza. Why is this happening? Because we refuse to live under occupation. We refuse to live in total submission. We want freedom. We want this occupation to end. This is not a state of war, as one of your guests just mentioned. This is a state of occupation that started over 75 years, that started with the British Empire giving Palestine to the Zionist movement in 1917. The only hope we have is in the growing popular support in America, in the movements, the movements, the human rights and the rights movements in America and across Europe, to take to the streets, to pressure their politicians into putting an end to this dark episode of not only the history of the Middle East, but also the history of humanity. If people are asking how was the Holocaust allowed and other genocides in Africa and across the world, now you can see this live on TV, live on social media. Palestinians, whole blocks destroyed, hospitals, schools, businesses. We are speaking about thousands and thousands of housing units destroyed by Israel. So my message to the free people of the world is to move, to pressure, to mobilize, and to take to the streets.
Refaat Alareer, you are the father of 6. How old are your children? And can you describe what it's like to live there right now?
Like I said, this has been systematically happening for over seven decades. It was the noose around Gaza's neck was tightened 15 years ago, and it's being tightened even further now. The situation is unspeakable. You can't describe what's happening in words. We speak about thousands, hundreds and thousands of Israeli bombs and shells targeting all areas of the Gaza Strip. The kids can't sleep, the kids can't eat, the kids can't even speak. Most of the time they're just mute, silent, shaking out of fear, sometimes whimpering because of how close the bombs are wherever you are in Gaza. And again, how the houses shake every time there is a bomb around. And this is happening again all over Gaza Strip. Israel is telling people, is pushing people forcibly to leave out of their homes and urging them to go to certain places like the city center or the UN places, shelters, and then Israel bombs the roads leading to these areas and bombs these crowded areas. Yesterday there was a massacre. Israel killed about 60 Palestinians in Jabalia refugee camp in a local market where there is a UN school, people taking shelter there. So whether it is my kids or any Palestinian kid or any Palestinian, no one is safe, no place is safe. Israel is bombing everywhere.
Those were the words of the acclaimed Palestinian academic and activist Refaat Alareer, speaking on Democracy Now! October 10th. Earlier this week, he was killed in an Israeli airstrike, along with his brother, his sister, and 4 of his nieces. Refaat last posted on social media Monday, writing on the platform X, quote, "The Democratic Party and Biden are responsible for the Gaza genocide perpetrated by Israel." When Democracy Now! Spoke to Refaat during the 2021 Israeli assault on Gaza, he also accused the Biden administration of enabling the massacre of Palestinians.
I think it was Biden that gave Netanyahu the green light to start this. When they tweeted that America supports Israel's right to defend itself, 2 days after the aggression started, I quickly said that this is going to be a long war against civilians because Israel is killing us using American weapons, using American technology, using American planes. America has, the American administration, all American administrations have blood, Palestinian blood on their hands. The massacre that is going on is on Biden.
Again, the words of the late Palestinian academic and activist Refaat Alareer, speaking on Democracy Now! In 2021, months after he had written an op-ed for the New York Times headlined, "My child asks, can Israel destroy our building if the power is out?" We're joined right now by Jihad Absalim, scholar and policy analyst from Gaza, executive director of the Jerusalem Fund. He was a student and close friend of Refaat Alareer. Jihad, thank you so much for joining us. Our deepest condolences on the loss of your friend, who you've known for some 17, 18 years. Can you talk about how you learned of Refaat's death and tell us the story of his life?
Thank you for having me. I was at work when my wife called me asking me if I heard something about Refaat and if the news about him were true. I opened my phone, I looked at my social media apps, and that was the moment I realized that he was gone. Refaat Alareer was a towering figure in Palestinian society, especially in Gaza. He transcended the role of a mere educator and a teacher. He was a mentor, a beacon of wisdom and guidance, a loving father and husband, and a compassionate son. Refaat's presence enriched the lives of hundreds, if not thousands, of students. His influence extended far beyond the confines of the classroom. Refaat wasn't just a teacher. He was a friend, a confidant. He was someone who loved to support his students and who believed strongly in the potential of each student, offering them personal advice and guidance. Refaat will be missed. It is really hard to sum up Refaat's story in a few words. But one thing I can say, Amy, is that Refaat's life was not without its share of many, many challenges. Despite personal tragedies and the harsh realities of life in Gaza, Refaat remained unwavering, using his pen and his voice to fight back and to write back. His resilience was an inspiration to us all, his students and friends and members of the cultural, intellectual, and literary community in Gaza. In a place like Gaza where educational resources are scarce, Refaat's mastery of the English language was more than a skill, it was a mission. He saw English as a key, a tool to liberation, and a means to defy the siege and intellectual and academic restrictions that Israel imposed on Gaza and other Palestinian communities. So for him, his teaching wasn't just about imparting knowledge or conducting exams. It was about empowerment, about using language as a weapon against oppression.
Do you know, Jihad, how he was killed?
From what we hear in the media and based on reports by his friends, neighbors, he was sheltering at a school and he received a phone call from the Israeli intelligence informing him that his location, that they located his place, that they identified his location. And whether this was a call from an official arm of the Israeli intelligence or a mere troll, we don't know, he decided that it's probably not safe for him to remain at the school where he was sheltering. So he went probably to see family, his sister, his brother, and at that moment, the place where he was bombed, which led to killing him, his sister, his brother, and his 4 nieces. Many of the details remain unknown, given the fact that the part of Gaza where he was killed, in Shija'iyya, is cut off from the rest of the Gaza Strip. It is under heavy bombardment, and it is the site of many atrocities that are still being committed by Israeli forces. So without having journalists and investigators and workers with international organizations access these areas, we can't really fully grasp all the details of Refaat's death, and of course, the tragedies that have befell many, many other Palestinians there.
Jihad Abu Salim, he's taught at Islamic University, is that right? Before the well-known human rights attorney Raji Sourani ultimately left Gaza, we were interviewing him at his home in Gaza City, and the house shook, and we learned then that Islamic University had been hit. Now, in the last days, we've learned that the president of Islamic University was killed with his family, Professor Sufyan Taya. That occurred just recently. He was a well-known mathematician and physicist. Did you know him?
I did not know Professor Taya, but as someone who went to both the Al-Azhar University in Gaza which was destroyed, the Islamic University in Gaza, which was destroyed, I can tell you that the scale of loss, the tragedy that has befallen the academic, scholarly, and intellectual community in Gaza and in Palestine is unprecedented. Israel is destroying the foundations of society in the Gaza Strip. Israel is systematically destroying our educational system, our cultural institutions, and today we saw footage of the Grand Umari Mosque in Gaza, a structure that dates back to thousands of years, also in ruins. This is a genocidal war of erasure, of uprooting, and of mass destruction. We mourn our teachers, our educators, our doctors, our nurses, our friends, our neighbors. And we also are mourning the loss of a society as we knew it that no longer exists. And this is all happening while the world is watching, leaving Palestinians in Gaza endure one of the largest bombardment campaigns in the 21st century. How is this acceptable? How is this allowed to happen?
Jihad Absalim, Refaat edited 2 volumes. Can you talk about those books, like Gaza Writes Back? He was a poet, a writer, an author, an activist.
In Gaza Writes Back, Refaat says, and I quote, "Writing is a testimony, a memory that outlives any human experience, and an obligation to communicate with ourselves and the world. We lived for a reason, to tell the tales of loss, of survival, and of hope." End quote. Refaat Alareer understood the power of English. He understood that in a place like Gaza, where educational resources are scarce and where educational institutions are cut off from the rest of the world, he realized that his mastery of the English language was more than a skill. It was a mission. So he saw English as a key to liberation, a means to defy the siege and the intellectual and academic blockade that Israel has imposed and continues to impose in Gaza. And as I said, Refaat's teaching wasn't just about imparting knowledge, it was about empowerment and about using language as a weapon against oppression. So when Refaat was teaching those hundreds and thousands of students, including myself, he said to us that we are living in a world that is refusing to hear us, is refusing to listen to us, and is refusing to listen to our stories. And he warned that the world will continue to perceive Palestinians as numbers and to perceive their pain as abstract statistics mentioned in the reports of human rights organizations that come out every year and then are rendered unimportant. So he told us that we have to write our stories. We have to talk about our stories, and we have to make sure that our stories are communicated in every language and in every way possible.
Jihad, I'm wondering if, as we wrap up, you can read the poem that Refaat had pinned to his Twitter page, the top, "If I Must Die."
I will, and it's a great honor to do so. Refaat wrote, "If I must die, you must live to tell my story, to sell my things, to buy a piece of cloth and some strings. Make it white with a long tail, so that a child somewhere in Gaza, while looking heaven in the eye, awaiting his dad who lived in a blaze, and bid no one farewell, not even to his flesh, not even to himself, sees the kite, my kite you made, flying up above, and thinks for a moment an angel is there, bringing back love. If I must die, let it bring hope, let it be a tale."
Jihad Abu Salim, I want to thank you for being with us again. Deepest condolences on the loss of your friend and mentor. Jihad is a scholar and policy analyst from Gaza. Refaat Alareer was the editor of 2 volumes, Gaza Unsilenced and Gaza Writes Back. We'll also link to his op-ed piece in the New York Times he wrote several years ago. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. I'm Amy Goodman. Meanwhile, here at COP28 in Dubai, protests in solidarity with Palestine have faced severe restrictions. Earlier today, Asad Rehman, the lead spokesperson for the Climate Justice Coalition, joined with other leaders of human rights groups in a media huddle to talk at an unofficial media briefing.
There's a deep irony that we have the Secretary General invoking Article 99 of the UN Charter, and in this a UN space where you have countless UN institutions calling for a ceasefire, even uttering the word ceasefire has been something that we were blocked from saying, and it has taken us a week of negotiating before we were allowed to say that sentence in there. But still today, any visual depictions of that, including badges, etc., people have been told they are not allowed to wear that. People have been told they will be debadged if they don't take off those badges or take off kafirs or take off these lanyards. I have to say, both of us who have been involved in this UN space for many, many years, this is probably the most restrictive we've seen. Way more restrictive than Egypt last year, and deep irony there, where we were promised that our rights as civil society would be protected here, and everything we have tried to do has been within the UN rules. Everything. We are well versed in the UN rules about what is acceptable and not acceptable, but the rules are being changed on a day-by-day basis. They've been interpreted by somebody else to determine what is acceptable or not acceptable. We were told that was because by the COP presidency. We went and saw the COP presidency, and the COP presidency said both privately and then publicly, it is not the COP28 presidency which is pushing for these restrictions. Then the question is, who is pressuring the UN and the UN institution, a UN agency, that we are not allowed to raise what is a question that is, of course, uppermost in everybody's minds, both what's taking place in Gaza, the fact that international law and humanitarian law lies in shreds, and what that implication means for us as organisations deeply committed to both the multilateral space and also, of course, international law.
Democracy Now! Is funded by viewers like you. Please give today at democracynow.org/give.